Well, good evening. Welcome, one and all, to Yada Yahweh Radio. Happy Shabbat. I did a reverse Hezekiah tonight. I don't think Yah was displeased, but with one exception, I had a pre-tune for Pesach. I have to say I do have a weak spot for rack of lamb, which is what I had, beautifully seasoned and grilled. A Malbec, which is one of my favorite red wines, the olive oil with bitter herbs. The only thing that I substituted, since it really wasn't Pesach and matzah, is I like sourdough bread toasted to dip into it. But I had a little pre-tune of my favorite meal of the year tonight. So sitting on the aft deck of the boat looking at a beautiful sunset, it was a beautiful day. Even got to play auto mechanic thereafter and figure out an electrical problem I had in my car. So other than chasing a playful puppy all around the house, I'm in pretty good shape. How about you guys?
Well, pretty good. It's raining, cold, but other than that, it's good.
Yeah, it was cold down here too today. It was supposed to get to 83, and I think it only got to 81. So it was, and we got a little overcast, so it wasn't quite the warm day that we were expecting.
What's Texas like, JD?
It is very chilly. I think we hit a high of about 38 today.
Oh, you know, my youngest son called me the other day. He said, I got a day off. It's school day, but I got the day off because they actually canceled law school because it was too cold. Got down into like a -5 or something, and they canceled school.
Wow. We just play.
My brother-in-law lives in Minnesota, was giving me a hard time. He goes, yeah, we had a warm front come through last week. We hit a high of 0 one day. They've been down in the negative teens for the last couple of weeks.
Here I was disappointed that the overcast came in, and it wasn't quite as pleasant this afternoon as it was this morning. Shouldn't complain, right?
We feel so bad for you, too.
Yeah, I know, and I was really trying to eke out some sympathy.
Yeah.
Now, we were in the midst, we skipped ahead from the second chapter of the second volume of Observations for Our Time to the 11th, and the 11th was really, or I guess the 12th, I should say. And the 12th was really designed just to be an update of a chapter I wrote a long time ago for Yada Yahweh in the 7th volume. You might say, well, why would you? You know, come on, idiot, you already wrote about this. Why would you do it again? Well, the reason is that made a commitment that I was going to go through Yahshua. I was going to go as far through Yahshua as at least the 18th chapter, which had me going over some ground that we had gone over before. And I don't know how much further we're going to go in Yahshua. There's some things that I'm just dying to do that come up towards the end of the book, but there's also a lot of things in Yirmiyah I'd like to return to. And as we were doing that, one of the things that I found, and I'm finally settled well enough that now I'm spending back to probably 7-8 hours a day translating and writing. So what was a 50-page chapter, I think at last count was 134. So there were a couple of other insights found along the way. One, right around page 50, I think you just stumbled into it, didn't you,
yes.
Kirk?
Yes, sir.
Akbar, that the Hebrew alphabet is the basis of the Arabic alphabet. And almost every important word in Arabic is a Hebrew word. So you shouldn't be surprised that Allahu Akbar has a Hebrew meaning. Well, in Hebrew, it doesn't mean Allah is greater, although that's really telling from an Islamic point of view, and there's no Muslim that ever wants to discuss that, because there's only one God. The God cannot be greater, because greater is a comparative term. And, of course, it was issued at Akbar, which we're going to run into in this particular prophecy. And Akbar was the place where Muhammad, when he was armed to the teeth against a Jewish community that had nothing but farm equipment, said, my God is greater than yours, Allahu Akbar. That's not what it means in Hebrew. So, Kirk, you did a little checking to see if the translation was correct, but what does Akbar mean in the original Hebrew language?
Mouse.
It does.
Is a mouse. The mouse that roared.
Akbar is the mouse that roared.
Yeah.
Who grew up to be a real rat. That's what Allah Akbar means. It means Allah is a mouse. An insignificant creature prone to attract fleas that became the most deadly animal ever to infect humanity, because it's the carrier. It likes to hide in the shadows of human dwellings, and the fleas that it attracts carry plague. So it became a plague of death, literal plague of death. But that's what Allahu Akbar means, is Allah is a mouse. Now, I was also encouraged. It wasn't my own initiative that I found this, but one of our most consistent contributors shared this with me, that there is a reference, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I just can't help it because you brought it up at the beginning of our discussion here before the show began. There is a reference to the mouse in last days prophecy, and it's in concert with the swine. But no question that the mouse represents Islam. After all, Allah is a mouse. And, of course, the swine is Christianity with the Christian ham. It says that in the last days it's the mouse and the swine that are going to be done in together, terminated at the same time. So Christianity and Islam are going to be indistinguishable foes from Yahweh's point of view. He's going to make no distinction between the two of them, and they're going to succumb at the same time.
And you have to like Yahweh telling the story this way. I
just love the way he tells the story.
Really, these are gems, man.
Yeah. One of the things that I found was just marvelously entertaining, and I had never translated it before, because I was always thought that the prophecy, the time of Jacob's trouble, and if you notice, I'm not using the term tribulation anymore. Tribulation is a Christian term. I use the time of Jacob's trouble, which is in Yirmiyah 30. And that's Israel's trouble, of course. And there's a song that begins with an event that actually sets that event up as the prototype for what's going to follow, as a dress rehearsal, if you will. Yahweh loves dress rehearsals. A historical event, a real historical event that foretells something that's far more significant going to happen later, like Abraham and Yishak going to Mount Moriah and playing out everything associated with Pesach, only to have Yahweh say, no, I'm going to take care of the lamb, and him doing it exactly 40 Yobel later. Well, an example of that is what Yahweh did with the Egyptian army pursuing his children, and it's Shemot, Exodus, chapter 15. And it's actually a song that the Israelites sang. And it's called the Song of the Sea. Well, the sea represents Gentiles. And it begins with what happened to the Egyptians and what happened to the children of Israel, and why one faced one fate and the other faced another. An extraordinarily vivid word picture of it. But in Yahweh's style, it transitions to being a prototype for what's going to come. And it's just breathtaking what God has had to say is going to happen to Pauline Christianity and Roman Catholicism.
Ooh, what was that verse
And that's
again?
how it ends. Pardon?
What was the verse again? Shemot what?
Yeah, it's in the chapter that, and I hope this chapter will be available for JB for you to post on your site here shortly. I've had several people been very helpful in editing it, and I'm probably now just a matter of hours from finishing my completion of it. What I'll do after that, I'll just do a quick read-through, which at 120 40 pages, we'll take 2 days to do a quick read-through. But I hope to share it soon. And it currently ends with the Song of the Sea, which is Shemot, Exodus, chapter 15. I'm not sure I'm going to leave it there. I may move it to the end of the next chapter, which deals with Yahowah 18 and the fate of America, because it seems to indicate that there are levels of destruction of peoples who come after Yisrael during the time of Jacob's troubles. And from what I'm able to piece together, there is the Magog War, which is the all-Islamic assault against Israel, followed by the belligerents that have allied with the Sunni and Shia Muslims, then going after each other, which would be Europe and the United States on one side, Russia and China on the other. And while it appears that China comes out reasonably unscathed, it's not so good for better parts of Europe, North America, and Russia. And in that second phase of the war, and then the third appears to be this land assault against Israel, which is probably mostly Chinese oriented. And so there's 3 different phases, and it looks like the Song of the Sea is talking about that second phase. So I don't know if you want to talk about it as World War III, 4, and 5, but that's kind of the way it lays out, and it seems to be addressing World War IV, when World War III is this Magog War, this all-Islamic assault on Israel. But oh my, is it poignant. And over and over and over again, it's the same message. The people God is most angry at, and he's angry. He says it over and over again. He's angry. And he isn't coming in peace. This idea, he's coming in peace for all mankind, no. He's angry and he's lethal. And he goes out of his way to say, the people that I'm going to do in, and that are going to suffer an eternal fate, are the leaders. Societal leaders, the merchants of death, religious leaders, political leaders, military leaders. And he goes on and on and on to explain them. And after he says those are the people that are in serious trouble, and there is, it's all an incurable ailment that they're suffering from. In fact, as there's a passage in the Song of the Sea that is so poignant. It has the belligerents frozen, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to speak. And they're frozen there, forced to observe, scared out of their mind because they realize that they're dealing with God. And they're on the wrong side. And they're paralyzed there, unable to move, unable to speak, as the children of Yisrael experience and celebrate Pesach, the doorway to life. They're precluded from it, but yet have to witness it. And it is just an amazing moment. And there's just so many of those in these passages that we'll have the opportunity to review as we go through this chapter and the next. So it really is a treat of words. All right, returning to where we were, this is a treat by itself. And in him, this is from Isaiah 17:6. I know we've dealt with the destruction of Damascus, the fall of the Syrian government. Damascus is a twisted heap of ruins. We've dealt with the fact that immediately thereafter, the world forces Israel to relinquish her core. In other words, that land between Gaza and the West Bank, thinning the nation to 5 to 7 miles, where 70% of the people live, becomes indefensible. And then just before the Muslims began to flood into Israel as terrorists by the millions, and probably by the hundreds of millions, Yahweh performs a gleaning. And he is describing that harvest here. This is the Towrah harvest, and his terms for it are as follows. And in him, this is Jacob, there will be a remnant who will be spared and survive. But there will also be physical beings who remain and who will be left behind. Gleanings, as in going around and immersing at the right time of year. An olive tree, 2 or 3 ripe olives in the top, the uppermost and choicest branch, 4 or 5 on its fruitful branches which have been cut away. Prophetically declares Yahowah, God of Israel. So, start at the top here, and there's so much to share. Jump in, guys, when you want to add to this. But Jacob is not just a metaphor and a synonym for Yisrael. And that's a united Yisrael. That's all of Yisrael. Yeah. That's not just the 12 tribes, because there's really more than 12. Jacob is synonymous with the covenant family. So when Jacob is used, you can read covenant family, you can read Yisrael, either one. You can read somebody who dug in their heels and was steadfast in their relationship with Yah and didn't veer to the right or to the left. You can also see him in contrast to Esau, who, as we shall learn, represents Roman Catholicism, Imperial Rome morphing into Roman Catholicism. And in him there will be a remnant who will be spared and survive, and there will be physical beings who remain, who will be left behind. This is Sha'ar. Sha'ar is equally comfortable being rendered either way. It's one of those wonderful Hebrew words of which my experience is it's about half of them, that the context determines whether it is like yare, revere, or fear. They're opposites.
Yeah, positive and negative, right?
Right. Ana, to answer an invitation and make a declaration, or to be afflicted and humbled, abased. And almost all the time when there are options, the context dictates whether 1, the light side, 2, the dark side, or both are intended. In this case, because it's a gleaning, and in this context, I think we'd be unwise to pick one over the other. I think it's both. Mm-hmm. But if we were to pick one, it would be there will be a remnant who will be spared and survive, because the context is favoring that. But it also suggests, based on the numbers, that the other side of Sha'ar is valid. There will be physical beings who remain. Gleanings. Gleaning is a smaller secondary harvest. How many harvests are there each year among the Moed Mikre?
3. Are there?
3. There are 3 of them, aren't there?
Yeah.
The gleaning is a secondary harvest. Mm-hmm. Was there a first harvest? You guys ever heard of a first fruit? Was there a real celebration of first fruit, a fulfillment of first fruit that might be meaningful?
33C, yeah.
Yeah, it would be that, wouldn't it?
Yes.
When Yahweh, as Yosha, fulfilled the promise of first fruits. That would be the first harvest. That's the harvest that is associated with Pesach and Matzah, by the way. All right? That's the first.
Yes.
This is the second. There is the third, the one that Yahweh covets the most.
On that day.
And the third one is really Yom Kippurim.
Yes.
When he returns for his children, Yisrael and Yehudah. So the fact that a gleaning is a secondary harvest, this is the second of 3, and there are 3 each year celebrated in the Moed Mikre, and there are 3 in the long path of human history. So these words are precise. Gleanings. Small, secondary harvest. of that which was purposefully left on the vine. Isn't that really interesting? That a gleaning, based upon this Hebrew word, which is olea, is of a small secondary harvest of fruit that was deliberately, purposefully left on the vine where few were taken. Well, can you think of any reason that Yahweh would leave some fruit on the vine? Or fruit on the tree?
Well,
how about what we're doing right now?
It still has a purpose.
Yeah.
How about continuing to write and to share and to post? Yeah, we have a purpose.
Yeah. Still nourishing.
There's a neck to communicate, a signal that Yahweh wants to lift up. That's why we're here. As in going around and immersing at the right time of year. Nakaf. Well, at the right time of year. Well, he's trying to say, all right, folks, there's a calendar here. This is a secondary harvest. What are we talking about? How about Yom Towrah? Yeah, which is clearly a harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Even Christians know it's a harvest. I don't know when it occurs or anything else, but it's a harvest. So it's comparable to encompassing and shaking off during the proper yearly cycle as a means of harvesting, while implying that those surrounded in this manner will enjoy the full amount and infinite amount of time as they're taken out of a threatening and dangerous situation. It's really close to Olam, the eternity. And this is from an olive tree, Zayah. Well, the olive is, of course, synonymous with the covenant. What branch was it that the dove carried back during Noah's celebration of the covenant in the ark?
Right.
Olive, wasn't it? Yeah. The olive. Well, what was the source of the purest light to pierce the darkness and allow the observant to read and recite Yahweh's word and back in the time this was written? Absolutely.
Yes. Absolutely.
And what was the means to anoint someone, dedicate them, setting them apart for service?
Olive oil.
Right. Yeah. What was amongst the most nutritious foods that a person could eat?
Olives again.
That was a healing ointment as well. And what is the longest-lived tree in this part of the world? I think there's only one tree that lives longer, and it's not in that part of the world. But in that part of the world, what's the longest-lived tree?
Still the olive.
Olives.
Right. An olive tree. 2 or 3. Shenim, shalosh. Ripe olives. Mature fruit. From Gerar to be taken away. In the top, Ba Rosh, on the uppermost, choicest branch. From the source that initiated all things. From the one who leads. From the summit. From the first and the finest. Even the most crucial branch. The highest branch or summit. Now, the highest branch is either Dod or Yosha. The summit is Moria. But if you were to talk about the top branch, in addition to being obviously Dod or Yosha or both, the choicest olives from Yahweh's perspective would be his children, his naturally born children. This would be Israelites, particularly Yehudim.
Mm-hmm.
So it was my interpretation based upon this description that the 2 or 3 represent 2,000 to 3,000 Israelites, naturally born, members of the covenant at this time. 4 or 5, Abba, Kamesh, on its fruitful branches which have been cut away. Clinging to a crevice, the olives flourishing in productive limbs. Those who live life abundantly and whose produce and to produce offspring in successive generations for the harvest. I have, in the midst of recognizing that there was far more that I needed to translate that tied in with this chapter that we're sharing right now. then I could put in the chapter, because a chapter is supposed to be 24 pages is the ideal length, and I'm 5 times that. The next thing I really feel a real need to do. Yeah, well, it's just there's so much to share. It's great stuff. And the last chapter of Yahshua is something that I'm going to put into the next chapter. And there's part of me that says I can't wait to get into it, and there's part of it that says, oh God, I just don't want to deal with this. It makes me so sad. And it's Yahweh saying, there's no one. I really wanted to reach out to my people. I wanted to communicate with them. Gosh, I looked. I tried to find someone. I couldn't find anyone. The people who speak the language, who have the intellect that is part of the gene pool that is Yisrael. The people whom this revelation was given, the land was given. The people who the Creator of the universe actually identifies himself with, who can think in this marvelous language. Wasn't a single one of them. Not one.
So sad.
We were the booby prize, but but I just laughed because I realized just how fallible and dented and frail and incompetent I am, and to a large extent, I think I can speak for all of us. We're flawed implements, and so it just makes me so sad that here's the Creator of the universe, and he's saying I could find no one. Now, why am I sharing that story? Because I've shared it so many times, and it's in a passage that we're going to deal with here shortly. And the reason I'm sharing it is because by default we became the fruitful branches.
4 and 5.
Yeah, by default. And honestly, we only brought, I'm going to speak for myself, I only brought one useful thing to the table. And I think it's for all of us. And that was a desire to learn. An open mind and a passion to learn. I want to know the truth. I want to see where the truth would take me, take us. So it was just an enthusiasm to know, a passion to understand. That was it. And look where it has taken us.
It's been a great journey.
Oh, my goodness. So, for no reason of our own other than we took Yahweh's testimony seriously and have shared it, we become the fruitful branches. And we're going to be cut away from that tree that's rooted in the ground, because it's time for us to be harvested too. And in this case, he's lopping off that part of the branch, because it's not just that it's a neck that we are riding, that Yahweh's lifting up. We're choder. We're twigs off of that branch. Got to lop us off for us to be taken out of harm's way. So just fruitful branches which have been cut away. We're not the uppermost branch. We're not native Yisrael. And so there's 4 or 5. And if you look at the numbers even in our company who participate in this program and listen to it and are active in the forums and share these books, it's the ratio is 2 to 3 Israelites to 4 to 5 Goyim. Prophetically declares, well in advance of this happening, Yahweh, not Jesus, not Christ, not Allah, not Hashem, not to the Lord, Yahweh, By the way, in the Song of the Sea, it was sung. And guess whose name is in it throughout?
I'm sure it's Yahweh.
Yahweh?
Yahweh.
There's even a familial Yah early on. After the first Yahweh, they refer to him as Yah in a very family-oriented way. God of, not the Roman Catholic Church, not the God of the Bible, not the God Jesus Christ, no. Not the God of the Vatican, not the God of Greek Orthodoxy, God of Israel. This is the last days. We're talking about now a period of time that's less than 7 years from his return. And he's not the God of Christianity. He's not the God of the church. He remains the God of Israel. And that means replacement theology is nuts. So, first let's talk about what this date is. If it were to occur on 2026, and there's a lot of us that think that that's the year. And the timing works out because that would make it 7 years to 2033. And part of that comes from this this idea of the 7-year time of Yaakov's trouble. But I just want to be careful when I say that well, I don't know where the wiggle room is to get away from 2033 as your 6,000 Yah, based upon 33 CE being the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and Shabuah, and the time of the foundation of Yahweh's home on Mount Moriah in 968 BCE. So it's pretty evident that 2033 is the date. And if you back up 7 years, you're in the fall of Towrah is 2026. Now, it does not say, there's no place that says that Towrah is going to happen 7 years before the return. It doesn't say that anywhere. So we have to be a little bit careful in dealing with that, and I want to be also careful in that at one time I made a big deal about Ek, which it says that the Philadelphia Ecclesia was going to be kept out of the time of Yaakov's troubles. But now we're dealing with a Hebrew statement translated into Greek. This is Yeshaya 17 is the most comprehensive presentation of the nature of the Towrah harvest and the timing of it. And while we can back up and be very close in terms of the range of years, I think it's a little dangerous to say it's going to happen in the fall of 2026. I think that's a distinct possibility. But there's other times as well. And so what I want to do here is I'm just going to share with you what some of the other times might be. Because the time of Yaakov's troubles begins with a murmur and ends with a scream. And so we could be kept out of the worst time of it and still be harvested in 2027, 2028. And the later the better for all of us. Mm-hmm. In 2026 on the Roman pagan calendar, Towrah commences on a Shabbat, a sunset, on Friday, September 11th. That's kind of a funky day, huh? Friday, September 11th. The following year, and it's a Shabbat. The following year, 5994 Yah, Towrah begins on Wednesday, September 1st. If, however, the first of Abib occurs on April 7th, 2027, rather than March 9th, then Yom Towrah would be celebrated commencing on a Shabbat, Friday at sunset, on October 1st. And by the way, the interesting thing about the Friday at sunset, October 1st, is it's the only time and you very, very, very seldom see this, when the astronomical, the observational, and Hebcal all have the same date.
Wow.
And not only do they all have the same date, they all have a Shabbat, Friday, commencing on Friday at sunset.
That's 2028.
So
right?
there is that possibility. And normally I would choose the earlier date because the earlier date of March 9th is closer to the 20th, 11 days from it, than is the 7th, which is 18 days from it. But you got to remember, Abib is not based on the vernal equinox. Abib is based upon what the word means. Abib, the ripening of a barley kernel in Israel while it's still green and receptive and growing. Well, the world is going to go through some hellish events. And so is it possible that as we do that and man continues to muck up this planet, that the barley is Abib, closer to the renewal of the light on the moon on April 7th, 2027 than earlier? Absolutely. So that's a possibility. In 2028, Towrah runs from sunset on a Tuesday, September 19th, through sundown on September 20th, although a case could be supported for the previous day. And again, I think it's important because people, when a lot of people, particularly those who have been raised in a religious environment, hear somebody equivocate on things like this, they are naturally prone to be skeptical, when instead you should be drawn to the person who equivocates and is not dogmatic.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to establishing the exact date of a Moed Mikre, there is anybody that is dogmatic is deceiving themselves and anyone they're talking to. Just the bottom line. There are so many factors. Are we to use observational or astronomical? If it is observational, from where? What do you do if the sky is overcast? The site that I have, Yoel provided on YadaYah.com in the second volume, the last chapter of the second volume of Yada Yah, it's based on NASA telling us when the light begins to renew on the moon's surface every year, so you can determine when you think the first of Abib is. But understand that, and it tells you, is it a fraction of 1%, 1%, 2%, that sort of thing. But keep in mind that it's based upon our current calendar, where the day ends at what time?
Oh, it's always midnight on our calendar.
Yeah, midnight, right?
Yeah, that's
midnight is when a day ends and the new day begins on our calendar, right? So that NASA is calibrated to that. When does the day end on the Hebrew calendar?
Sundown.
Sundown
to sun up.
So you can see something that looks like, well, this would be observational or astronomical because you've got a certain percentage of the moon's light that's been renewed. But if it's after sunset, it's the next day, not that day. But it would show on that day in terms of the NASA readings because of the difference in the calendars. And then you have to say, okay, a renewing light on the moon, does that occur when you're looking away from the sun and therefore would have the greatest view of the moon, or does it happen in the west as the sun is setting, where the moon is the most difficult to see because of the overwhelming glare of the sun? I'll help you with that. A renewing light on the moon always occurs in the west, just prior to sunset. Always. 100% of the time. Full moons are always rise as a full moon in the east at sunset. So the full moon is the opposite side, and the renewing light of the moon is towards the sun, which means it's the hardest to see. And so there's so many factors and trying to differentiate it. And it's by design because it's not a dogma. It's not a religious holiday. It's not something you mark on your calendar and perform some kind of a ritual. It's something to understand, to think about, to ponder. Why is it Towrah, the first day of the seventh month? Why does it follow Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, and Shabbat? And so it's about our understanding what these events represent and why they have been timed as such, not some ritual. So that's the reason why I'm equivocating. I said it could be this, it could be that. You know, it's not, God's not trying, if he was trying to say, this is what you need to do and what you need to do it, and this is what it does for you, he just laid it out that way. He
gave you all of that you needed.
He gave you everything you needed to think and to observe and to answer the important questions. And he wants you to have the thrill of figuring it out. And while this gleaning may have occurred by this time, the final opportunity prior to the worst of Yaakov's troubles would run from Saturday, the seventh day of the seventh month, following on September 8th, 2029, through the first day of the first week of the seventh month in 5996. Yeah. Now there was a word that was we shared as immersing in this statement, Yahowah 17:6, and it was said that as in going around and immersing at the right time of year, that was the word for that was nakaf, and nakaf paints a picture of Yahweh immersing his children in his light, of him encompassing us and surrounding us, so that as his children we enjoy the full amount of time remaining. A marvelous term. Yeah. It quite literally means to gather up and taking these ripe, ready, and valued olives away so as to keep us safe during a threatening and dangerous situation. One word paints the entire picture. This is a menacing and perilous circumstance associated with the time of Yaakov's troubles, which is defined for us in Yirmiyah 37. A prophetic statement properly positioned just ahead of the moment when in Yirmiyah 31, Yahweh restores his covenant with Yisrael. Shanaim, meaning two, is also second, and Shalosh, meaning three, is also third, reminding us that this is the second of three harvests along the Mikra invitations to be called out and meet with God. The former is indicative of a small number where few are involved and of taking sides. The latter depicts a series of three things, as is in the case with three sets of 40 Yobel epics defining the history of humankind, and of the three times each year that the Mikra are celebrated. Further, 2 speaks of a man and a woman coming together as husband and wife, and then a father and mother, while 3 is indicative of family, with the addition of a son and daughter. Arba, which is 4, defines the duration of time, often of testing. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights during the flood. The Torah was revealed over a 40-day period on Mount Horeb. And the children of Israel, after enduring a 400-year epic as slaves in Mitzrayim, wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. More relevant still, man's time is divided into 3 periods of 40 Yobel. 40 times 50 is 2,000 years. The first of these 3 40 Yobel periods commenced in 3968 BCE, when Adam and Chava were expelled from the garden. And it continued to 1968 BCE, when Adam affirmed the covenant with Yahowah. The second ran from 1968 BCE to year 2 2,000 Yah, which was your 2,000 Yah, to 33 CE, which is your 4,000 Yah, when Yosha and the set-apart spirit of Yahweh fulfilled the first 4 Mikre, thereby enabling the covenant's promises in 4,000 Yah. The third 40 Yobel era started in 33 CE and will conclude with Yahweh's return in 6,000 Yah, which is 2033 in the Roman pagan calendar. With these numbers, we're given the entire portrait. Kamesh 5 also depicts the part of the body between the lowest ribs and the waist where most vital organs reside. It suggests that this message is vital. If we want to continue living, we should pay attention. As our abdomen, it may even suggest that those harvested are careful regarding what they consume, so they were nourished by Yah's word.
Can I add something?
You sure can.
Okay, I'm in agreement. When I went to 5 and I was just thinking about it and looking at it, I was thinking more of a Yobel year on that one instead of the 40 and the 4 with the 40 years, the 4
times the 50.
Period.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're right. I missed that. I should have recognized that, but you're right.
Well, no, I'm just.
It's actually telling us.
I'm a little greener.
It's 4 times 5, folks. Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, as I was thinking about it, I do study these old pictographs, and I looked at it and I said, well, Hay is a 5, and what's a Hay? Well, a Hay is an engaged individual observing Yahweh, reaching up to Yah, and beholding something wonderful. And I said, well, that's very indicative of these people, of these olives, because we're talking about these metaphor for us. And then I went back and said, well, gosh, what's the number 2? Well, that's the Bayat, it's the family home. And then I said, well, gosh,
that's where we're going.
What is the Gimel and 3? And it's walking to, you could say, walking to Yah, or it also means to gather together. And here's a gathering. Yeah. And then I thought, well, gosh, delete. I mean, this is the easy one. I mean, we've got the Pesach doorway, pathway to get home. I mean, so it's not the big picture, but it is fun to look at those things and say, oh, there you go. So that keeping it simple terms for people like me, it works really well.
You know what I like about that in particular, Kirk, is that I should have thought of those things, and I'm glad I didn't, and that you did, and that what I really enjoy the most, I've been doing this with 2 people here, 3 people here recently, actually, is augmenting the insights by insights provided by others. Because it's a lot more fun, and what's one of the reasons the chapters go from 50 pages to 140, but it is a lot more fun. So what you just shared needs to be added to the chapter.
Oh, okay.
It's marvelous. I agree. It's not just the 40 times 50. It's what each of those numbers represents and the letters that were used to convey them. Home.
As long as we're one of the olives, that's all I care.
Yeah. The person standing up, being observant.
Yeah, that's good.
Walking to Yah. Yes.
Well, I only discovered that. I read that 2 or 3 days ago, and I looked at it, and I looked at it all night, and I looked up everything that I could think of, and read everything that you said, and I didn't even think about it until about an hour and a half ago. I looked at it and said, what's a Hay? It's funny how it hits you.
Yeah, it does. It's marvelous. And that's the kind of thing that we should be identifying. Now, I am convinced that the smaller of the 2 represents the Israelites because it's the top, choicest branch. That's the branch of Dod. And the direct descendants, therefore, of Jacob, who will be reaped from the tree at this time. The larger figure most likely represents Gentile, who will be gleaned as adoptive children as a result of embracing the conditions of the covenant that was affirmed through Jacob, and for giving rise to successive generations of Yah's children, because we seem to be the most two numbers, the smallest and the largest, or the largest and the smallest, 2 plus 5, or 3 plus 4? The answer is the same, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's 7.
It comes up to 7.
How many billion people are there on the planet right now?
Well, they're probably close to 7 billion, if not 7 billion.
Yeah, 7 billion is the answer. What is 7,000 amongst 7 billion?
Always come out 1 in a million.
1 in a million.
Yeah.
Yeah, another affirmation that the second statement that Yah etched in stone, that there would be thousands who benefit from his mercy because they observe the terms and conditions of the covenant. It's 1 in 1,000. Yahweh is the Elohim, God of Israel, not the God of the church. Something else we should always never lose track of. So, looking at this from the perspective of where we are, it would be wise to keep a keen eye focused on Damascus and await its demise, expect its demise. We should expect the Syrian conflict to continue until there are so few civilians on one side or the other to kill that surviving Islamic jihadists turn their weapons and rage against Israel. And that doesn't mean they're all going to be killed. Right now, the majority of them have left Syria as refugees, poisoning Europe and many parts of the world. We should expect that the U.S. will continue to remain on the wrong side, to try to impose its will throughout the region and remain its principal provocateur, its arms merchant, the merchant of death, such that Israel will eventually capitulate. It'll have no choice. We are told that when this occurs, I read an article today that the Trump administration, because it's so enamored with sales of military hardware, and the largest purchaser of military hardware is Saudi Arabia, that even with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the dictator running the country, having ordered the murder and dismemberment of a Washington Post journalist, Trump administration is not going to forestall the sales of its most powerful weapons to Saudi Arabia.
That's it.
So we are the provocateur here. We're the merchants of death. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a foe in the region that would ever invade it. Those weapons have a singular purpose. We might as well kill the Jews on them. Israel will capitulate. We are told that when this occurs, the children of the covenant will be taken home, removed from the valley of death, so that they do not have to endure the tidal wave of Muslim militants that will surely flood into the promised land, leaving death and destruction in their wake. It's going to be a gruesome scene. In that specific day, this man will actually gaze upon, genuinely regard, and always accept the Almighty, the one who engaged and acted to get this done, his Maker. And his eyes will choose to continuously look at the set-apart one of Israel. Now, context is king. What has just happened? 7,000 people out of a world of 7 billion have been gleaned, right?
Mm-hmm. Those
who have been gleaned. Yahweh gets right down to the perspective of the individual, because it happens one at a time. Of those individuals who have been gleaned, this is what they're going to see. In that specific day, this individual, this man, will actually gaze upon, genuinely regard, and always accept the Almighty. on that day, we're going to look directly at God. See him face to face.
Wow.
That's what that says. And we're going to view Yahweh as the one, not who created us. It doesn't use bara here. It uses a word that is so common that it's amazing that every English Bible gets it wrong. It uses asa. Asa means acted, engaged, did the work, got it done. Well, why is it that every Christian babble, has to mistranslate asa? Asa must be used 1,000 times as a verb in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms. It is not an uncommon word. It means to do, to act, to engage, to do work.
Probably one of the top 20 words used.
Right. So there's no question that, bara, the word for create and creator, it's not like it's hidden. It's like the third word in the whole of the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms. Now, there's a reason. They don't want those who are harvested to view the Almighty as the one who engaged and acted to get this done. Because where does that leave Jebus?
Yeah.
Where does it leave their New Testament that there's nothing that has to be done? It's a gospel of grace. By faith you are saved. Well, wait a minute, there's something that was done here. And the one that we're going to meet is the one who did it. Which means it was done. Nothing was required of a New Testament. It's been done. And Yahweh did it. And we're going to look at Yahweh as the one who acted to get this done. Because we know the role that he played in Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, and Shabuah. We know the role that he is playing now in Towrah. We're going to recognize that our Savior isn't Yosha, it's Yahweh. All Yosha means is Yahweh saves. Yahweh's the one that made the commitment on our behalf and worked to make this happen. And this individual's eyes will choose to continually look toward God, the set-apart one of Yisrael. Forever we're going to look at Yahweh as the set-apart one of Yisrael because he chose to communicate everything we need to know through Yisrael. He acted through Yisrael. The set-apart one. I don't know if there's anything that is a bigger omission other than Yahweh's name being replaced with Lord than the importance of set-apart versus holy.
Yeah, that's true.
The moment you understand set-apart and that Yahweh never uses holy, he always uses set-apart, Kadash, to describe himself, to describe the Spirit, to describe Yosha, to describe Yisrael, to describe the covenant, to describe the Shabbat, to describe the Moed Mikre, to describe everything that's important. It's always set apart. Okay, set apart from what?
Set apart from the earthly.
That's right. Right.
Yeah.
The Shabbat, the covenant, the Torah, Yisrael. From God's perspective, it's set apart from the community of man, from the corruptions of man, from the religions of man, from the politics of man, from the pollution of man, from the lies of man, from the deadly nature of man. And our ability to interact with God is because he set apart aspects of his nature for us to get to know him. The set-apart spirit, the most set apart in Yosha. His Torah words which are set apart. His interactions with Yisrael. So, as a seven-dimensional being interacting with us in 3D, he has to set apart some of his nature to do that. And so we're interacting with God, who has set apart aspects of his nature for this intended purpose, so that we would be set apart from the common, from the profane, from the things that are most popular among humankind. It's so essential to understand, and it's all corrupted with holy. And once again, this is a view towards eternity, and it's still the set-apart one of Yisrael. And this time, Yisrael has two meanings, dark and light. The dark side, it's individuals who struggle and strive against God. And on the light side, it's individuals who engage and endure with God. All from Sarah. And based upon Sarah had her good moments, and where she was saying, "Hey, why don't you do my Egyptian slave?" And then when God said, "No, we're not doing it that way," she laughed in God's face. She had her less than ideal moments, but she had her spectacular moments as well. And she was the one that recognized, well, we got to get Hagar out of here. And Ishmael, they got to go. Abraham, you may not have figured this out, but let me help you with this one. They got to go.
He would have kept him.
Yeah, he would have. Absolutely.
He has to.
And he became Islam, so she was right. Yeah. In fact, Yahweh even says, "Hey, sorry, your wife, she's right. Do what she says." And as I say, it's just telling that English Babel translations are one to render Ashah's creator, rather than the one who engaged to get this done. And Ashah means to act, to engage, to work, to accomplish something. Christianity's propensity to mislead their faithful is just designed to preclude the believers from realizing that Yahweh has laid out and accomplished everything required to save the covenant's children. The Christian deception is therefore predicated on this false notion that this Old Testament God, the God of the Torah, could not save, so that Jesus Christ had to come along and establish a new religion. But the simple truth is that for a relationship such as the covenant to be of value, both parties must engage and act, including the God who is offering it to us. So then, he shall never accept nor gaze upon the altars these works of his hands, representing what fingers have made. They will not focus upon that which is associated with the Asherahs, the mothers of God, the queens of heaven, the Madonnas with child, or the worship of sun god images. It's perplexing to me that Yahowah could be so clear, so redundant about his disdain for religion, for his desire to obliterate all traces of religion, and yet for the religious to have hoodwinked society into believing that religions were established by God and are desired by God. How is it that the religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all claim that the prophets were inspired by God, only to negate everything he had to say? And Christians lug around a book that contains Yashayah, Isaiah. And here, the Towrah harvest, the harvest of trumpets, has occurred, and those who have been harvested will never see anything that is religious again for the rest of their existence, which is forever. That's the first thing. After God says, you're going to get to look at one another face to face, and you're going to recognize that I'm the one that made all this possible for you. And in the next statement, and you're never going to say anything that's remotely religious again. How do you deal with that? You think your religion is saving you. You think your religion was established by God, that He has a church. And every church has an altar. And the Asherahs played this enormous role in Christianity. And it's not just Orthodox Christianity and Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodox and Russian Orthodox and the Copts, where Asherah is center stage. She is the Madonna child. She is the Queen of Heaven. She is the Mother of God. There are statues of her in all of those, which represent 3/4 of Christendom. But don't think for a moment, if you're a Protestant Christian, that you escape. Because the single most important date on your calendar is the celebration of Asher's pregnancy, Easter Sunday. They even named it after her, for God's sake.
Didn't even try to cover that up.
Didn't even try to cover it. In fact, in the first version of the King James, it's even called Easter instead of Pesach, Passover.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make any attempt to cover it up. The Ishtar pole, the Astarte pole, is the Christian cross now. And one time it was the Christmas tree where I said, "What idiots are you? You're bringing in this dead tree and you decorate it with silver and gold. You think somehow that's going to be indicative of life? Are you crazy?" The commonality between Babel Christianity and Babylon is overwhelming. And it's just stunning that Christians can't figure it out. I mean, what is Christmas? Well, 9 months after Asherah was impregnated by the sun, she delivers the son of the sun on the day that the days start getting longer, the winter equinox. Not winter equinox, but the winter solstice.
Solstice, yeah.
Yeah. So, Asherah. And by the way, it was plural. Asheram. The blessed. The favorite. Hail Mary, blessed are you among all women. It means blessed. Even attributed to Mary. The favored relationship. She is the goddess of grace and good fortune in pagan mythology. Presented as the blessed mother, consistently worshipped as the consort of the Lord, Baal, a.k.a. Satan, and the god El, symbolized by a decorated tree and sacred wooden pillars. She was a popularly worshipped pagan and mythological Babylonian, Assyrian, Phoenician, Armenian, Canaanite Mother Earth goddess, upon which Roman Catholic religious festivals of Easter Sunday were conceived. The idol of the Madonna and child statues and altars were built to emulate her. The pole upon which the Christian cross was derived in steeples, the basis of the Christian Christmas celebration, the Christmas tree. She's the second person of the Trinity in Babylon, also known as Astarte and Ishtar, Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, later worshipped as Venus in Rome. From Ashtar, or Ashar, to pronounce blessed, to receive blessings, to relieve suffering, to make happy, to engage in a relationship, and to show the way. But it's not that, it's also the worship of sun god images. The sun pillars used in idolatrous pagan worship, where incense is commonly burned, to be aroused by the sun, to be leavened,
Greg, how could somebody always miss this? I mean, this is so. I mean, I read this again over and over that this Asher stuff is so Astarte and all. It's just so obvious. I mean, granted, I didn't do my homework when I was young either, but I mean, these are people who write the history books. These are the people who write the lexicons. I mean, how do you miss that if it's not on purpose? I mean,
it's not that Asherah played a small role in the Babylonian religion, or in the Roman religion,
or the
which became Roman Catholicism, or in the Greek religion, or in the Egyptian religion. Right. She was a star. It's not like she was a small player. In fact, Assyria was named after her. She is all over the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. God is constantly condemning her. And God is condemning her at a time of Jacob's trouble in the last days, which means her influence is still pervasive, and her influence only appears broadly in one religion, where 3/4 of the people still worship her. In fact, 100% because of Easter and Christmas still worship her, and the Christmas tree and all that sort of rubbish. But in Shia Islam, they celebrate Ashura Day. They even celebrate in Sunni Islam, but not to the same extent. How do you miss it? It's so obvious. Ashur was also called Astarte and Ishtar by the Babylonians. She was named Isis by the Egyptians, she was Helena by the Hellenes, the Greeks. And it's not like she's subtle here. I mean, Isis was the second most depicted god in the Egyptian Trinity. And Ishtar is the basis for Easter Sunday. She was the central figure, along with Bel, for which Bel is named, with Bel, with the Lord. Venus by the Romans. She was Lord Baal's lover in ancient mythology, and Baal is the most commonly used Hebrew word for Lord, and it's Yahweh's nomenclature for Satan. God chose it to describe Satan because the adversary's ambition is to lord over, to control, to possess humankind, deceiving the masses into bowing down and worshiping him. The religious myths claim that Asherah was impregnated by Lord Baal in the guise of the sun, so that in her maternal role, she has been worshipped throughout time as the Madonnan child. This goddess is called the Mother of God, the Queen of Heaven. Impregnated during the Sunday nearest the spring equinox, today's Easter, she is said to have given birth to God, the Son of the Sun. On the winter solstice, today's Christmas. So while all Christians celebrate her holidays, Catholic and Orthodox Christians the world over demonstrate additional reverence to her when they light candles in front of their Madonna statues, and then they repeat the ritual Hail Mary prayers. In fact, every word of Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee and has blessed thee, is derived from the mantra of those who worshipped Asherah in Babylon.
Isn't that telling? Wow.
Breathtaking.
Wow. Yeah.
And that this affinity with Christianity should not be missed. It should be noted that Asherah's most commonly observed religious festival, Easter Sunday, occurs when the sun is in the constellation of Taurus the Bull, the sign expressly attributed to the Lord Baal. 9 months later, God's birthday was celebrated annually on the winter solstice. Today's Christmas. The name of our planet was derived from a blend of Asherah and Astarte. Mother Nature references or allusions to this goddess as well. Her pictogram is now the scientific symbol for woman, the combination of a circular sun disk and a cross. It is therefore also seen in the most universally depicted of all Egyptian religious symbols, the Ankh, the symbol of life. To keep this all in perspective, remember, Satan doesn't want to be known as the adversary. He does not want to be associated with the Satan title. The idiots out there that are involved in Satan worship have no idea who they're actually worshiping. And it sure as hell ain't Satan. Satan wants to be worshipped as God. He wants to be seen as God. He doesn't want to be known as the adversary, but instead as the Lord. The most common religious substitution for Yahweh's name. That puts him in a position of power and influence over humankind. As the Lord, the masses bow down to him, and they worship him. So like all of Satan's schemes, Asherah helps Baal the Lord reinforce this deception by advancing the notion that there is a Queen of Heaven and Mother of God, and Easter and a Christmas. These pagan religious myths provide credence to the deception that has become Christianity with every stroke. Satan repositions himself as God rather than the adversary. It's all the same story, just different names. The mythology of the Babylonian religion was incorporated into the Greek religion, was absorbed by the Romans, and then evolved into Roman Catholicism. The papacy, their hierarchical church order, nuns, fathers, and monks. The adoration of Mary, the notion God has a mother, the rosary, Sunday worship, the Mass, confessions, bowing down, the sign and symbol of the cross. The golden sunburst icons placed on their altars. Most of their priestly apparel, including the Pope's hat, infant baptism, purgatory, holy water, wax candles, incense, steeples, saints, Lent, Easter, Christmas, calling God the Lord, and especially the Trinity, are all examples of religious rites, customs, and terms conceived in Babylon. The religious traditions of a decorated Christmas tree, Asherah means grove of trees after all, the wreath, circular symbol of the sun, the Yule log, mistletoe, Santa's name, including St. Nick, Santa's job and his costume, the Easter bunny, dyed eggs dipped in the colors of spring, the Easter ham, hot cross buns, are all direct derivatives of the Babylonian sun god religion. These are things which have no place in heaven. Now, elsewhere in his Torah and prophets, Yahweh speaks of the poles of Asherah worship. These religious relics were later incorporated into Christianity as the Christmas tree and the Christian cross, even the Christian steeple. Shia Muslims, based upon Muhammad's testimony, still celebrate Asherah Day, named in honor of this pagan goddess. Somewhat strange for a religion which claims to be monotheistic. But then again, Satan covets a bride. You know, in this regard, Shaman also addresses the worship of sun gods. Today we see Shaman in obelisks like the Washington Monument, and that found in the center of the Vatican. And also church steeples. Many Christian crosses bring all this together when the crosses incorporated the circular disk of the sun in their design. Even church draws from this heritage, because church, from whom we also derive the English word circle, was a sun goddess. At its heart, Christianity is a Roman interpretation of the Babylonian sun god religion using Greek names. It is the most deadly counterfeit ever perpetrated on humanity. Now, these revelations create a special problem for many living in the United States of America. The most enduring political symbols of the country are sun god related. On the secular side, these include the national and presidential eagle image. Where was that derived, folks? What was the single most important symbol of Rome?
It's on their
their eagle.
Eagle, of course, but it was on the thing.
Washington, Jefferson's, and Madison's tombstones. Religious obelisk. The Statue of Liberty, based upon Athena. The pyramid eye on the nation's currency from Egyptian paganism. They're all an abomination to Yahweh. And those showing patriotic allegiance to such symbols will be excluded from heaven. Yeshayah 17:9. In that specific day, this is boom, boom, boom. So these things are happening in rapid order. In that specific day, it shall come to be that the cities of his refuge and defensive fortifications shall be abandoned and deserted, consistent with an occult presence among the religious and merchants of death. And then the uppermost branch of the olive will be completely deserted for a time because of the presence of the children of Israel. And then there will be appalling desolation and stupefying ruin. What it says about the defensive fortifications is they're going to be abandoned. It didn't say that America's military is going to have all of its nukes destroyed. It didn't say all of its airplanes were going to be blown up. It didn't say that all of the naval ships go poof. No, it says that the military fortifications are abandoned, deserted. Things are going to be so fearsome. And the recognition that those who came to destroy Israel weren't blown away by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, but instead stopped by Almighty God. And that Americans' weapons in the hands of these Islamic belligerents weren't even like a pea shooter compared to an atomic bomb. Those who are paid a pittance to go play soldier are going to say, no. You got to be kidding me, but man, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. America's military is deserted. That's just what it says. And militaries around the world, they're deserted. Now, that does create an interesting scenario, though, doesn't it? Because if America can't project a tactical force, if it can't use its aircraft carriers and battle groups, and it can't use its transport airplanes, and send men and women over to make bad situations worse with bullets and bombs and with rifles and the like. Mm-hmm. What is it going to rely on?
Well, the nuclear bombs, I guess.
That is it. That'd be all they've got. And that's what's going to happen next.
You know, it must be a parallel, perhaps, somewhere there when Moshe crossed the Akbar, and they were followed around. They were watched by the Amalekites. Actually, recorded in their history books, or different sources recorded that they saw the Egyptian army drown, and it scared them to death. And they moved away for a long time. Of course, later they did come back, as we know, because they took over Egypt and re-strengthened, and they all the way from Syria. They took over all the land that the Yehudim refused, or the Israelites refused to take over for 40 years. And so that's when God took them out of the desert for 40 years to refine them again.
Yes, that's the parallel. The parallel. The world's going to see, Philbin 11, the world's going to see the fate of the Islamic jihadists who have come in at least 100 million, and maybe twice that number in the Magog War. They're going to see them go right past the IDF, who will have no ability whatsoever to stop that number of people. They couldn't even stop 10% of that number of people. They're going to see them just go like a tidal wave right over them to go poof. It's like the Egyptian army chasing defenseless civilians, and all of a sudden they're in the middle of a sea, and there's this giant wall of water on both sides, and here are the defenseless civilians walking across, and the most powerful military on earth is pursuing them, armed to the teeth, and all of a sudden the perpetrators are just paralyzed, unable to move. Can you imagine watching that? The Song of the Sea and the Torah, vivid portrait of that is breathtaking. And that is what is going to happen. The world's going to watch that, and I want to tell you that what this says is that the defensive fortifications are abandoned. Now, is it possible that we're just talking about Israel and the IDF abandons posts? Because what's the purpose of being a defense force when you got 100 million jihadists in your midst?
If you had the bullets, the guns would melt before you could shoot them. I mean, you just can't do anything about them.
No, of course not. Of course not. So could it be that Israel's defenses are gone? Yes. Could it be that the world's defenses are abandoned? Yes. I would bet on both.
Mm-hmm.
But one is assured. Abandoned and deserted, neglected, consistent with an occult presence among the religious and the merchants of death. God cherish. Similar to the religious writers and the expert merchants and the enchanters who plot against and devise detrimental plans in concert with Satan. Comparable to those who conspire in secret. Similar to the environmentalists in wooden areas with mind-altering incantations and biological agents, as it will be with the skilled craftsmen, artisans, technical workers, carpenters, industrialists, and idol makers, whose business is death and destruction, from teresh to cut down while preparing portions or potions devised to silence. That's a pretty apt description of what the world is going to be like, what the world is like now. And then the uppermost branch of the olive, therefore, will be completely deserted for a time. What God is saying there is there's going to be a period of time after he has gleaned Israelites, native-born covenant members, and Goyim, those choters grafted into the what is right now a fruitful branch, that there's going to be a time when there are no olives on that tree, barren. Because it's going to take desperation for Yahweh's stubborn and hard-headed children to finally come to their senses and say, we can't do this. Our religion has failed. Our military has failed. Our politics have failed. Our intellect has failed. We got nothing now, and it's sure and certain doom. Yeah. And it's only then that they're going to say, we'll abandon these things, accept the first condition of the covenant, and come to trust and rely on Yahweh. It all has to transpire that way. And so there is a period of time there won't be a single olive on that tree. That's what God is saying.
Well, that's not unlike Hezekiah's story either. I mean, there was nothing there until he turned around and said, we're surrounded. We got no other option. What you got?
And even Hezekiah, he didn't have anything going for him. He had made boo-boo after boo-boo, and he was like all the rest. He was trying to negotiate a treaty with enemies.
Yeah.
Right.
Please come save me, and they didn't.
Yeah, right.
Like America, like Israel probably with America. Say, wait a minute, you're supposed to be an ally.
Right, and what he'd found is that Yahweh's home, called the temple, but Yahweh's home existed. He found a copy of the Torah in it. Somebody read it to him. He says, this explains everything. And he got his act together. The first thing he did is got rid of all traces of religion in Yehuda. And then they celebrated Pesach.
America doing that today?
Can you imagine that? Wouldn't that be just spectacular?
It would be.
Oh, Yahweh's going to do it for us, so we don't have to worry about it.
They will do.
Yeah.
They will eventually.
Yes. So, it's a really vivid portrait of what is going to happen. But you look at Hezekiah, he didn't have a clue. There was nobody, and finally somebody stumbled on a copy of the Torah and began to read it, and all of a sudden, look at the result. The Assyrian army gone. Yisrael, Yehuda, not Yisrael, but Yehuda spared. And the people celebrating Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim not just for 1 week, but for 2 weeks. By the way, I'm not on the right date, which didn't bother Yahweh at all. And today, what I think is going to happen are 2027, 2028, when all this is occurring, is they're going to find what we have said and written. That's why sharing it, promoting it, conveying it is so important. That's what they're going to find. And it's not because we're important. We're not. It's just that there just isn't any other place where complete and accurate translations of Yahweh's testimony are available and explained. I mean, I am unaware of anyone, a single person, reading any significant amount of these translations and explanations without coming to the conclusion of, wow, this resonates. Finally, I've been searching for the truth. I've wanted to know who God is and what he wanted and what he was offering. And all of a sudden, now, it's exactly as I had always suspected it needed to be. It makes sense. And it's just a willingness to be committed to finding the truth and sharing it. And so they're going to find this. And it's going to make a difference at the right time.
Wow.
And what's going to happen to Israel is what needs to happen. It's what sometimes it has to happen to all of us before we give up trying to fix it on our own. It has to be desperation time, and that's what's going to happen. Appalling desolation, lifelessness, stupefying ruin. This is Shama'ah, a stunning and astonishing deflowering and defoliation of trees and plant life. Horrible devastation, leaving these places ravaged and temporarily uninhabitable, completely deserted and desolate, such as to be a wasteland, clothed in horror. I don't think there's any rational explanation for this other than chemical and biological weapons.
No.
This is a complete defoliation. This is the landscape clothed in horror. It's not the landscape obliterated, which would be a nuclear bomb. It's not the landscape riddled with bullets, which would be conventional jihadi attack. It's the landscape as a wasteland, clothed in horror, devastating, leaving places ravaged and temporarily uninhabitable, completely deserted, deflowering and defloration. So I just came to the conclusion we're talking about chemical and biological weapons being deployed here. What do you think, Kurt?
I found shamim, the verb for shamama, and it says to be void of inhabitants and visitors. They're talking about outside people that didn't live there, but also it says the winds that dry up the land and turn it to a desert, a wasteland. Also it says one in horror and astonishment is dried up inside. But the part about the land is if they drop these chemicals, Yah knows how to blow the wind a particular way, and he'll just wipe out everything that's away from Jerusalem. It seems like it'd be more chemical than nuclear, but there could be some nukes going on too.
Yeah, the winds would bring nukes. Personally, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there'll be a nuclear bomb exploded in and around Israel. Is there a possibility that one could be detonated in Damascus as the Iranians try to deal with the last gasp of futility and try to hold on to their control over the fallen city and country? Yeah, perhaps. But even then, with the winds blowing from west to east as the planet rotates, that blows back on them and not on Israel. Yeah. So
chemicals.
When you talk about defloration and a wasteland clothed in horror, yeah, it kind of looks to me like World War I, the trench warfare, where they do the.
Yeah, those.
And you look at people just clothed in horror, and the horses, and not a tree, not a shrub, not a blade of grass, nothing. Clothed in horror. That's what it strikes me. But what we know for certain: appalling lifelessness, stupefying ruin, and we know we can. You look at the word that's scorching wind, turning things into a wasteland. So, I can tell you that I don't even know if I care if it's from a searing hot wind or chemical biological weapons that are released in mass, because the end result is identical.
Yeah, it doesn't much
appalling desolation, right? The stupefying run. But anyway, the words are there for a reason, and we were given brains for a reason. It's I think it's important for us to try to explain this, and one of those two things is going to cause it: a scorching wind, which could be the aftermath of a nuclear blast, or chemical biological weapons. But
that stuff lasts so long, where the chemical stuff would dissipate. I would think would dissipate.
Chemical weapons. They a day after the chemical weapons have been used, you're good to go. In almost all cases.
Well, sometimes
it can be. You look at Chernobyl right now; they're still trying to encase that whole thing.
Geiger count is crazy.
Concrete, because it's a whole different story. I just don't. Yahweh doesn't engage in much of human affairs, but he does engage. And he drowned those Egyptians. He's going to engage in the final phases of World War III, IV, and V. He's engaging. And since this is the time where he is engaging, I just don't see it. I do not think that Yahweh is going to allow a nuclear holocaust in Israel. I think man's going to perpetrate it over the Americas, over Europe, over Western Russia. Yeah, I think that man. God's not going to do it, but man's going to do that, and I think it's likely. I just don't, just like when I agreed to expose and condemn Muhammad, the one who spoke for the mouse. I said I'll do it, but I want protection for my family, and he said, yeah, that's got it. Yeah. Without that, I wouldn't be alive. I mean, so does he use his malak for certain purposes? I mean, yes, he absolutely does. And so I think that his malak would preclude Israel, particularly Yehuda, particularly Jerusalem, particularly Moria, from being destroyed. He's going to do a lot of destruction in those places, but it's him cleaning house.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Well, we're no longer broadcasting. Haven't for the last 11 minutes. I was pleased to see that I guess this is a topic that people are really fascinated on. I know that the most people listen to this program, JB, through your site or through other places, and not necessarily at the time it's broadcast on Blog Talk Radio or on the archives of Blog Talk Radio. But as we began today, there were more people in the forum by a long shot even before we began than I've seen in a while. So, Kirk, I think you're right that this is a topic that people are interested in.
I think it's so timely. I just
yeah, and it's we have just begun.
We're
only halfway through Yahowah 17, but we've got so many.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. Are you going to make a new timeline again, like the old one that you had a while back? And is that worth doing? Or?
In terms of going through the Yahowah 17 and just saying, okay, here's the series of events. Yeah, in fact, that was the one. Although I changed all the translations, so I updated them. But it was the one place where as I went through the commentary, that whatever I wrote 7-8 years ago, I couldn't find much that every place else I've changed everything. It's not that I got stuff wrong. It was amazing that I was so pleased to see in so many ways that virtually everything that, in terms of the translations, in terms of the insights gleaned from them, I'm not sure I found anything. So I'm prone to mistakes, so I'm not saying that I'm flawless here. But in this particular case, with this, which I think is the most as important as any statement in prophecy and all of prophecies, I didn't find where I made a mistake. I made errors of omission, but not commission. And in the timeline, I'm 3/4 of the way through it right now. It's the last thing I'm doing, and I'm making very few changes. But the only thing that I'm not making, everything else is wholesale changes, but not because it was wrong. It's because, wow, there's so much more there than I didn't see. So yeah, it's going to have that.
Good.
If you're on page 50 of the new chapter, you've got some reading to do. And also,
I read up to about 92 in the first one, but I did the other one. We just printed that one, and I was going through to see which changes, what you had done, so I didn't omit something that you might talk about. Can I ask you one question before you get away?
One of the things I've done too is I went back through the previous chapter. I renamed it. The previous chapter. It's no longer. Maybe the best thing to do is kind of wait and let those that have been so helpful editing it do some edits of it before I share it. But the new name for the chapter I will share. The entire chapter is about the 15th and 16th chapters of Yahowah, which are entirely devoted to Moab. And I've come to understand now exactly who Moab is. And so I've renamed the chapter Where the Torah's Voice Died.
Yeah. Good title.
And I'll give you one guess as to where the Torah's voice died.
Well, Christianity killed
Damascus,
changed it, and all the religions.
Yeah, the Torah's voice died in Galatians, and then was obliterated by Romans.
Yeah.
Paul silenced the Torah's voice. And every aspect of it, as you go through and you look at what is being said about it, Moab is Pauline Christianity. And so I have gone back through the previous chapter. And I had a lot of references to Pauline Christianity, but I've just reinforced that. And I think done a better job of explaining why Moab is projected throughout all of these and during the time of Jacob's trouble in the last days, when Moab hasn't existed for, 2,400 years. Yeah. It's what Moab represents. It's just like Esau is destroyed during the time of Jacob's trouble. Edom, based on Esau. Well, Edom hasn't existed for 2,500 years. That's what it represents, that is being destroyed. And boy, do we have some insights on that.
We got a lot of reading.
One of those insights. So fascinating. All right. Looking forward to it. May Yah bless and have a marvelous Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
See you all next week.
Talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.